Okay, everyone. I tried to record a review of the Philosopher's fifth hour on my regular phone. I don't know how that works apparently, so I'm going to do it again. I think some people could stand to use it here the second time, and maybe I'll say a couple things in a different way that may be more helpful. Okay, so the first two philosophers were picked last semester because they're pretty versatile. They apply to just about anything. It's interesting to sort of come up with thinkers that are on a spectrum, because anything that can come up is going to be on that spectrum somewhere. So on one end of the spectrum we have Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who believes that people are essentially good-natured, and they come good-natured, and they come packaged authentically. There are elements of this in Catcher in the Rye, because Holden sees people as being inauthentic because they've thought themselves into knots. They're not authentic. They think something, they say another. They find someone attractive, but they tell them that they don't like them. And so there's an inauthenticity there. And so Holden's reacting to what he perceives as people who have used logic to sort of, like I said, bind themselves into knots. Although there are elements of Plato in that novel too, I have to say. So that meshes well with the cord analogy, which is that we come factory sealed in a roll, like a headphone jacks. It looks pristine there, and if you analyze it, if you pick it apart, if you pull it apart, it's going to mess up. Remember that cord analogy is not Rousseau's originally, but it's a good explainer. Loosely, broad brushstrokes, Rousseau is a little bit like a modern-day Democrat, thinking that people are generally good. It's just that they have unfortunate circumstances that arise, and that we just need to nurture them, and everything's going to turn out fine. It's very democratic to say that you give a poor person some money and they'll be good. The reason that they're being hindered, the reason that they're thieves, let's say, is because they've been pressed to be that way because of economics. Remember, these are real broad brushstrokes. We're skimming pretty quickly. So on the other end of the spectrum we have Plato, and Plato believes that we come packaged as animals, and that we're animalistic. We believe in our impulses. We're emotion-based, and our whole lives need to be a metacognitive and philosophical struggle against that. And the more we think, the more human we are. That was a very common Greek perception, that the one thing that makes us human is that we have the ability to think, and that we should hone our ability to think in order to flee constantly from our animalistic impulses. So he believes that philosophy is necessary to provide a better life. And this is, real roughly speaking, a more modern-day Republican view, basically that people are animalistic, and it's not just money that will fix someone. Let's just say people are more likely to take handouts and use them improperly, because that's their natural state. Wealthy people too. A wealthy person is going to gravitate towards being corrupt. So two ends of the spectrum. The center, this is probably a tug of war back and forth, and the middle is the correct answer, but those are natural sort of defaults that the modern day right and left have. So I find that's likely to come up. And then, just like the cord analogy helps explain Rousseau, Plato's famous allegory of the cave from the Republic shows that man's natural state is inferior, and that people are seeing two-dimensional things. They're very oblivious. We need savior people. We need philosopher kings to have the courage to go up the stairs, see the truth, be blinded by it, be discombobulated by it, potentially be destroyed by it, but hopefully survive, come back down, and slowly give people nuggets of philosophical wisdom to bring them out of their animalistic nature. So those are the first two philosophers. Golding's thinking as a hobby is concerned with grade 1 and grade 2 thinking. He feels that grade 3 people are not thinking. either because of a lack of capability or a lack of desire. I hope this is recording. Yeah, it's recording. Grade 2 thinkers are essentially destroyers, and grade 1 thinkers are creators. He feels that grade 2 thinkers are easier to come by. Your basic teenager, myself included when I was a teen, gravitates towards 2, finding hypocrisy in everything. This was also Holden Caulfield. This was McCandless too. He saw hypocrisy everywhere, and he left. In his mind, he destroyed culture. Thought it was worthless. Fled from it. Grade 1 thinking is creative. It's a beneficial process. I think you can infer from Golding that 2 and 1 are both needed, but you shouldn't be permanently 2. You end up nihilistic, not believing in anything. And you may need to do some grade 2 thinking to clear the forest to make a house. The house being a creative process, like the grade 1 thinkers would do. This is also a spectrum, because on one end you have a destroyer, and on one end you have a creator. And so everything falls in that spectrum. Any idea that you hear, someone says, DirecTV is a crappy company. I'm looking at a satellite right here, but it's a crappy company. Okay, great. That's a grade 2. You've just destroyed DirecTV. Fine. It's in shambles. You've done your work. Well, now what? If you then say that Comcast is a good company, that's a little bit more level 1, because you're proactively giving solutions. Level 1 is fragile. It always is fragile. You know, if you make a stained glass window, that's sort of an example of grade 1 thinking. It's beautiful, it's inspiring, but all you need is a feisty teenager to throw a rock at the glass window and it's broken. So what else? Let me check my notes here. Oh, the easiest example of grade 2 thinking is Descartes. Even though admittedly he was trying to clear the foundation, he's trying to destroy first before he created. But he was not able to, he did not feel comfortable creating, because he destroyed so much that he ended up in his head entirely thinking, well, all I can really prove is that I exist. And you can't exactly start a grade 1 philosophy from there. If you've destroyed everything but that your brain is probably provable, then you've gone too far. To then talk about Comcast being a good company doesn't make sense on that foundation. Like, all I know is I exist. Comcast is a good company. There's some leaps of logic there. He went too far down, probably, by his own admission. So he was probably capable of grade 1. I have not read enough of Descartes, to be honest with you, just to see how much grade 1 he actually got into. He's famous for the Latin phrase cogito ergo sum. Look that up if you like Descartes. That'd be flashy to put into an essay. St. Augustine is a good example of a level 1, because he was obsessed with the idea that philosophers always ended up gravitating towards a more destructive, ego-driven, I'm right. That's not a creative process. You're all wrong, I'm right. That's 99% grade 2. So we thought religions of all type were philosophers agreeing to come to a consensus and build very intricate structures. And religions do that. So many brains link into one common thesis that they prove things way above our heads, that a single person can't easily look at a religion and defend it, because it's a group hive mind of people creating something huge, incomprehensible to the individual. And in the City of God, which was, I'm going to guess 480 AD, well over 1,000 years ago, in City of God created this basic, I guess, example of the difference between religion and philosophy. So that's a good stand-in. It's a good cliff notes for what grade 1 thinking would be. Although Golding uses Einstein as a grade 1, I think that's fair. And to me, it's a little harder to describe why Einstein is a grade 1, because I can't talk easily about quantum physics and such. Okay, the 5 things you think will make you happy but won't deals with paradox, which you guys are experts in now. Remember that as a cheat code. Anything you like from 5 things you think will make you happy but won't. Don't use Wong's name. Use Plato. I know it's cheating, but it's accurate. It's Platonic. He was obsessed with paradox to Plato, talking about how doctors are best at killing, bank guards are best at robbing banks, all sorts of things. Firemen are the best at setting fires. And that's what Wong is into, the paradox of not profession in this case, but the paradox of what we desire. Let's see. I picked out David Wong because if there's a high likelihood that any argumentative prompt is going to be about human desire in some fashion. And those are the 5 things that we all are tempted by. One of those 5 things: beauty, power, wealth, fame, beauty, power, wealth, fame, crap. I can't remember the other one. I'm sorry. Those are all paradoxical, and at the end, when you approach 10 out of 10 in fame, you end up feeling alone. Also touched on the very fast-forward description of our philosophical development, our spiritual development. As a broad brushstroke, technologically, we're skyrocketing, but when it comes to moral consensus and feelings of the nurturing of the soul, you could argue that we're going down in the postmodern age. We're stripping away consensus. So the example was that the classical era is a good stand-in, or a good metaphor is the lecture hall, where there's consensus. People are all joining together for one common cause. The classical era is the teacher leaves, but people are just sort of paused. And the postmodern era is when there's a breakdown and people start doing whatever they want to. I didn't get into this in class as much, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the positives of postmodernity. Bias alert. I think that postmodernity is doing bad things to our collective soul, but many people have argued, a lot of ink has been spilled about the idea that postmodernism is ultimate freedom, because once you realize the teacher leaves and you do whatever you want, that's when you're free. You can do what you want. That's free will to get up and go get a drink of water. That's on you. And when the teacher's talking, something really big is happening, bigger than the individual, but there's no freedom there. When you in class today, when you were taking notes, there's no you in that. There was no autonomy or free will. You were doing what's expected of you. You didn't have a chance to flourish and play the guitar. So there's that. There's a counterpoint to that counterpoint. Let's not get into that. Okay. It's getting cold out here. One counterpoint about post-modernity again is Scarlet Letter. In Scarlet Letter, you have the traditional era, the classical era, the teacher era. There was a huge consensus about what was right and wrong, and they were highly functional morally. But that book really points out the side effects of too many people, a lack of diversity of thought. That there was some weirdness, as they all collectively believed that, let's say, the Indians were some sort of satanic force. So there's definitely, once again, we're at a place where the center is probably the accurate one. Into the Wild. I'll go over the literature just real quickly here. Into the Wild is a rejection of post-modernity, okay? McCandless fled the moral confusion and hypocrisy of society and went out to find simplicity. Simplicity is more in line with the classical era, because my phone's starting to shake because I'm freezing my butt off right now. Sorry about that. Postmodernity is confusing. No one's telling you what to think or believe, and that is freedom, but maybe it's too much freedom. So he's looking for a simpler time, a simpler place, when you're just out in the woods and you're collecting your own firewood. That's more of the simplicity that you'd find in the traditional era, pre-1700. Catcher in the Rye, once again, Catcher in the Rye is a tug of war between the two poles. Because on one hand, he sees the hypocrisy of people essentially in this postmodern era. But he's not searching for simplicity. He's searching for more confusion. He's using his brain to philosophically dig deeper. And I think he's trying to find the solace of believing in something, and the adult community is not giving him that. In terms of Great Gatsby, Great Gatsby kind of stands alone, which is maybe a good thing. It doesn't quite fit into the mold of everything we've been discussing. It has more to do with the American psyche. I think it's very probable that I shouldn't say that. It's likely that you'll see something about the American identity, and Gatsby does that. Gatsby does fit in. It shows about the paradox of wealth. Here we have people who are 10 out of 10 wealthy, and they're not happy. So that's pure Plato, actually, now that I think about it. Gatsby is very Platonic. And you could tell that Fitzgerald's thesis, his point, if you were to convert that book into an essay, it's a thesis about how what we all strive for, wealth, it doesn't do it for people. You need to find something else to make you happy. I'm going to skip a couple of the terms just because I don't want to make this video too long. But radical subjectivity is the idea that the truth is hard to find. There are let's say 10,000 facts that you could choose if you were to write an essay about Bolingbroke High School. And since you can't put all those facts on a paper, you have to choose 40, and that's a lot too. That 40 says more about you than it says about Bolingbroke High School. I want to warn you first as an individual. Radical subjectivity is not a helpful place to stay at mentally. To believe that there is no way to find facts, that everything is basically people's opinion. That's not a healthy place. That's not a healthy philosophy to put in your number one spot in your head and see everything through that lens. It's not. But for the purposes of rhetorical analysis, it's very fruitful temporarily. What you see then is this will not happen on the AP exam. But let's say that you had an essay, a rhetorical analysis on Bolingbroke High School, someone writing an article about them. All of a sudden, if you have the radical subjective lens, you're going to see that that article says radically more about the author and what they're up to, what they think, what they want from you, all the soapstone stuff. You're much more likely to see that article as the author than you are to see that as an article about Bolingbroke High School. And I think that's one of the lessons I'm most proud of teaching you, because a sophomore would see that as factual. It's about Bolingbroke High School. Maybe there's one thing I can learn about the author, two things. But radical subjectivity teaches that no, you've learned a couple things about Bolingbroke High School, but you've learned radically a lot more about the author and their view of the world, what they value, etc., etc. My example about the AP classes still stands. We have 3 teachers teaching towards the exact same goal. 5s for all of you on the test. And as you've talked about with your friends, there's a gulf of difference. There's insane differences between our classes, and that's radical subjectivity. I did not seek out, nor did Miss Speciale seek out to make a class about themselves. That would be terrible. And there's a teacher I don't even think would have that perspective. I hope they wouldn't. But it ends up being that way. I have to go through 100,000 details about those 3 writing skills, and I have to pick. I only have however many days to teach it. So, by me truncating what is most important, I'm picking a route that says more about me. That's just the way it is. And if you teach someday, or if you're a father or mother someday, you're going to be catering and tailoring facts to your son or daughter. That's you. It's all you, all of it. So I think that has a good chance of helping you on the argumentative prompt. But I think that I've taught you radical subjectivity through the weeks, and I think it's helped you flex that part of your thought process for the rhetorical analysis essay. So that's that. I hope this review helped. I've got to sign off because I can't go on. It's too cold. All right. If you have any questions, email me, and I'll see you tomorrow.